Hello, today I want to do a video on the upcoming Travel Channel episode that I'll be on that's supposed to be airing sometime this fall. How that ended up happening that I even got on it is I was working on this Lost Treasures of Montana series of books. And so from our Custer Country book, there was a story called The Far West. And I would post these shorter versions of these stories with the topo maps on TreasureNet, this metal detecting forum, which has got a lot of topics on a lot of people. And I posted on Facebook. I have a Facebook page, Lost Treasures of Montana. So anyway, I'm posting out this material and these stories and maps of where I believe this stuff is. And so I get contacted and where'd you get this information? And I said, from years of research. And they said, well, we're with the Travel Channel, and we're interested in this story. They ended up by called, and there was like a conference call with the producer and all this people, and it's like this thing's moving fast, and it's kind of unreal. But they ended up wanting me to be a consultant when they filmed in Montana. And would I be able to do that? So anyway, because it was like, how many chances are you going to get to do this, you know? And our books on Lost Treasure haven't even reached 2 years of having the first one up. And we land an episode of the Travel Channel. So anyway, there was a bunch of emails, phone calls back and forth leading up to this. The exact date is kind of in between these 3 days, so I can't really plan with work. And then the date set and on a Monday, I think it was the 14th of May. And then a week before, they want some people that I know that might know about this gold and how it got to be there. And so I said, well, there's a couple guys, I'll give them a call. And I called this Tom from the Beartooth Prospector Gold Club. And so he said, yeah, me and Brett will do it. And the Travel Channel had emailed me these 2 PDFs of these different stories on the gold from the Far West. And I thought, well, I better read these stories. There must be something I need to know. And the first one I read is from 1968. And it said that it was gold bars loaded on the Far West at Williston in Dakota Territory. So I looked on Google, and Williston wasn't founded till 1887. And the Custer campaign for the Far West was involved in, and the story of the gold being buried on shore was 1876. So Williston didn't exist. There was no way it could be Williston, North Dakota. So anyway, okay, my version of what I believe from my stories holding water compared to this old book. And then the second book was from 1978. And I'll just avoid naming the books and the authors, and because there's a chance one could still be around. Anyway, this one I read the version of it, and it's naming people that never showed up in any other accounts. And so I'm thinking, I'm starting to question my own thing here, because this one kind of, it seems logical, but then they included a map and they showed Hardin, Montana on the Yellowstone River. So anyone familiar with Montana would realize Hardin, Montana is on the Bighorn River. So they had a real glaring error, which would bring their whole version of events under question. So a few days before this, they decide they want to have a breakfast roundtable discussion at this little local restaurant. And so we were all going to be there. And 2 nights before this, I'm on the phone with Tom. And Tom normally says he never uses the internet. Well, I looked on the internet and he said, that's gold bars loaded on at Williston, North Dakota. And I go, Tom, that never happened. Williston didn't exist. So we end up down at this restaurant, and there's these two guys that are dressed like cowboys and cowboy hats and all. And it turns out they're the Feldman Brothers from Arizona. And so they're the treasure hunters for this show that's coming up. And they don't want to tell the name of the show, so they finally, one of them later in the day did give me a name of the show, and I don't even want to say what I was told it was, because I'm not sure that if that was just to keep me quiet and make me quit asking. So, but it's going to involve gold, and if you, I guess you just, I've been checking, typing in gold, doing searches to see when something on the Travel Channel comes up with gold, and I believe it's all on lost gold. So that might be your word there. That so we're at this little breakfast roundtable discussion, and I'm sitting on here in the middle, and Tom's on this side, and Brett's on this side, and they go, so how did this gold end up there? And right away Tom and Brett just start going and talking, and I'm sitting there in the middle. And so this video is going to include things I'm sure that are going to be cut from the show, because they were here for a week, the Travel Channel, and I was filming with them for one day, and this whole thing's going to get boiled down to a 1 hour episode, so I will probably just be a cameo. Now, anyway, they go, Tom's telling about these gold bars loaded on at Williston, and so finally I had cut off Tom, and I go, Tom, I told you 2 nights ago on the phone about these gold bars. It never happened because Williston didn't exist. And so for a few days after that, Tom was not happy with me, and he said, no one cares about your rehashed stories. And I said, rehashed? If you look at Thomas Penfield, that author, Thomas P. Terry, all they had was little 1 or 2 sentences, 1 or 2 paragraphs, very brief, no story. Just maybe your basic to start to research a story. But I said, I think they had like 24 stories. I have 153, so, and a lot of them are never published, never been published before, and they're all in our Lost Treasures of Montana series of books. 7 volumes, 2,900 plus pages with topo maps, because we add the terrain features that are mentioned in these old stories and legends, pinning down locations where these things are supposed to be. So anyway, Brett, he had gone a step further though. He had created a map on Google, and so Brett's got his map there, and they're asking me, is this the island? Is this the island? And I go, well, I use topo maps, which are different, made from a different time period. Brett's using Google Maps, that's another time period. And I was not at Brett's house when he made his map, and it's a different scale, so I can't say that's the island. If I was there, I'd know exactly where he zeroed in on that river. So anyway, according to my topo maps and some research that I read in a book a long time ago, there was a Captain Marsh's logbook entries, and he described taking this gold off the boat, and this was after the Custer, his 7th Cavalry, his group was wiped out. Reno and Benteen, they had wounded, and so Captain Marsh and his Far West, his riverboat, they had orders changed to take on the wounded, and it's believed that they had about 4 days after the battle before they headed to Fort Abraham Lincoln to try to save the lives of these wounded soldiers, that they prepared the boat by cutting grass supposedly 18 inches deep, putting a canvas across that so they had something soft for the wounded to lay on. They chopped wood to have all the fuel so they didn't have to stop. on this emergency run to get to a hospital for the troops. And they took on, I believe it was Comanche, the wounded horse from, I think the officer's name was Kellogg. He was the last thing put on board the boat. And they headed downriver. But prior to that, Captain Marsh and 2 crewmen took a cart, and according to his log entries, they took the gold off to bury it. In case they hit a snag or sank or something, the gold would have been lost. So, anyway, the gold came into their hands by, according to the stories, a group of teamsters that were coming from Bozeman that were trying to get to Bismarck had this gold. And when they got to the river, now the area is already infested with hostile Native Americans. And so they hailed the boat and asked him to take on the gold. They wanted to try to get back to Bozeman because they didn't think they were going to make it to Bismarck. So Captain Marsh takes the gold. The teamsters head back, and later on the burnt out wagon and 2 of the men were found dead near the base of the Pryor Mountains, and the other member was found a further distance away that apparently he ran but still never made it. So that led to possibly the belief of the stories of gold, a lost gold mine in the Pryor Mountains, and that's included in my Custer Country book. So anyway, the Far West ended up on this mission to go up the Bighorn River for bringing supplies for the troops that were under Custer, Terry, and Gibbon, for trying to corral the Native American tribes, the Sioux, the Northern Cheyenne, and I believe there were some Arapaho and some other tribes that had left the reservation. Their mission was to force them back on the reservation. So anyway, the Far West prior to this would ferry troops across rivers, bring up supplies. Terry, Gibbon, Custer would all meet on the Far West and plan their next movements. So near the end of this campaign, the Far West was going up the Bighorn River. They were supposed to go to the mouth of the Little Bighorn, and there they were supposed to drop off some supplies. But there was an officer for the military on board the boat, and he didn't believe they were at the mouth of the Little Bighorn River, so they proceeded further up the Bighorn River. Then it was getting too late in the day, and so at night, on this fast-flowing river, they had to tie up somewhere, and they didn't want to use a river bank because if they got surprised, they'd probably be wiped out. But they remembered earlier in the day there was this island, so they go back downriver and they tie up on that island. So they have water on both sides of them, and it's a safer spot for overnight for the ship. So it is in that area, within sight of that island, where there's this place called the General Custer Fishing Access, and that's where people today could take their boats down and put them in the river. Well, I heard in the past that was where General Custer actually crossed with his troops at one point prior to the Little Bighorn. So this is a spot where I believe the freighters came down and met the boat and the gold got transferred. So it was at this point when the next morning after the battle, the first person to arrive to see the boat is the Crow Scout Curly. But he couldn't speak English, so he gets on the boat, and he tries to tell them in sign language that Custer was wiped out. But they didn't want to believe it. And so the next day, early in the morning, they see this guy being chased by about 12 hostiles. So a few people from the boat are firing shots at the hostiles. The hostiles let this guy escape to the boat, and it's the scout, Muggins Taylor, who later became one of the sheriffs of Colson, Montana, and he was trying to reach the boat. He told them Custer and his troops were wiped out. that's when they found out there were these wounded with Reno and Benteen. And it took 4 days for these troops to make litters and carry all the wounded to the far west and get them on board the boat. Now here we'll back up to Captain Marsh and 2 crewmen with a hand cart taking the gold, and according to Captain Marsh, they were using what appeared to be a game trail. Now this is in the dusk, getting late in the day, and the sun's already starting to go down. And so I believe they were on the road the freighters used, the same path used by Custer and his troops to cross, and they're following this what appears to be a game trail. And there's no settlers in this area. It's an overgrown road. And so they see to the northwest a series of ridges. Captain Marsh had this idea there could be a place to hide the gold. They have a shovel and I believe a spade with them, and they, according to the story, halfway up the bluff, they placed the gold and covered any sign of it. So anyway, we're at this location, and I told the people, yeah, I believe this is the same trail, and well, today it's improved and vehicles drive it, and they didn't believe it, but they could see the ridges. And so earlier at this restaurant, they were asking, well, where'd you see this Captain Marsh's logbook? And I go, I had this story done in 2006, and so we're looking back a decade or more. I don't remember the exact book. So we're going out there to hunt, and when they asked about Brett's map, basically, and this map I made, I said I made my map at home, sitting in front of my TV on my laptop, according to the story by Captain Marsh. So, and Brett speaks up. I'll vouch for his maps because of one other story in our Russell country. There was a story about 100,000 in gold coins buried by this guy that died in a cabin fire, and we researched and we found the homestead patent information, and Brett found some website where he could type in that homestead information, and he pulled up the current owner, and they called out to this other end of Montana about permission to hunt for these gold coins, and that person would not give them permission. It was a flat out no. But the research we did landed dead on that one. There was even a section where there was sheep grazing and was a forest land, and they couldn't get permission to even access into that area. So they got kiboshed, but for my research it was a success. And so later on you'll realize how my research ended up being a success on this story. So I told him, I do these maps, I got like 153 stories, I know where I make my maps for. If you let me lead, I'll drive you right out to where we need to go. And so they were looking, because for a while on my map, my topo map, it showed this Fairfield school. And prior to this, one of the producers was out there, and he had called me and said, yeah, I'm looking for the Fairfield school. And I said, well, it's probably not there anymore. It still shows up on the topo maps, but this is the days of the one-room schoolhouses, and they often move those things around. So, but I go, I described the terrain for him and all that, and he goes, yeah, I'm here. He checked with a rancher. Yeah, that's where the Fairfield school used to be, he got told. So he knew, yeah, my map, I got them right where they need to go, because that was like one identifying terrain feature. So we head out from this restaurant, and we drive to Hardin on the interstate, and then we take a road north, and it happened to be all this construction, so it's real slow going. It's gravel. We're in the middle of nowhere at a red light for I don't know how long, 15 minutes. Finally we get to go further, and we get to this place and pull over, and we're out on this strip of grass, and I'm like walking around thinking, yeah, I wonder if the snakes are out yet, and anyway, this was where the Fairfield School was, and there's no building, and I'm thinking this would be a great spot to metal detect because you figure there might be some coins around here dropped or something, you know what I mean? It's got to have some stuff. And so uh, they do a little filming there. And then the producer says the order of travel and follow me. And we follow him down, across the highway, and down this dirt roads that are got a lot of potholes. And we get to the river, the Bighorn River. And we do some filming there. And the producer says, so where did the far west tie up? And I go, well, this ain't the spot. And he goes, what are we doing here? And I go, well, you told us the order of travel and to follow you. And I pull, they're like figuring what to do next. And I pull out my book and I got it open to my topo map page and I line it up with the bluffs that are mentioned by Captain Marsh from the far west. And I said, well, we need to go back to the highway, take a left. We go 2 roads to the one marked Foster, and then we take a left on that to the river. So we did that, and we pull in past the sign that says General Custer Fishing Access. We reach the river. I look up river about 150 yards, and there's the island. So that's where the far west tied up. So I explained the story. They did some filming where me and the 2 treasure hunters are walking down this road. Probably not on the film. Maybe it is. Will be on the show is where one doesn't think that with a cart these 3 men could move this gold to those ridges. And the other brother believed from the types of carts that he was familiar with from the old West days, it could be done. He could do it by himself. And so from there, we load up and we go to this ranch that's just up by where the old Fairfield School was. And we're there, and he gave permission for them to metal detect around some of the bluffs there. And so this guy, after we did some hunting there, he started telling about now he's way older than me. He grows his crop for well, I think it's barley for some brewing company. And so anyway, we're talking to him, and he tells about his mother, that she lived until she was 96 years old, and at the end she had this big interest in all this gold that's buried somewhere near their property or on their property. And so they bought a bunch of books for her, and he said, I read one of them, and it had Captain Marsh's logbook. And so they got all fired up. I said, you just made my day. So anyway, from my research, we ended up on a property where someone actually validated they had read this damn logbook themselves. So that made me happy. It was a success for the research. But he also told stories of years ago. Every so often, every so many years, there's people out there hunting for this gold. So other people are still coming to that area. And he said there was these 2 brothers that had some construction equipment, and they had tore away a big chunk of the bluff looking for that gold. So that someone else had put a lot of effort into that bluff. He also told a story that's I kind of pieced together with Thomas P. Terry, the United States Treasure Atlas author, because he had a spot. He placed the gold on the east side of the Bighorn River. And so he told a story about this guy who came by train and rented a wagon and a team, and he went up this one creek, and he was gone a week, and when he come back his wagon was just loaded down. But nobody knew what he had on the wagon, and then speculation was he found the gold. So this guy told the story, and I haven't run across that story. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist. but I do believe it made an old newspaper article at one time. And I believe that Thomas P. Terry, because he did his research on newspaper articles, I believe Thomas Terry came across that article, and that's why he placed the location for the gold on the east side of the river from that local story. One other interesting thing that this rancher said was how long his family has been in that area, and it was from the time it opened up for settlement, and that was like over 100 years ago. But he said back then the Bighorn River was closer to where he lives, and he said every year the river keeps cutting more to the east, more to the east. So hearing a couple hundred yards could be the difference from 1878 to today. That makes the cart story of moving the gold more feasible too. So anyway, I wasn't expected to get noticed and asked to be on a travel channel. I didn't get paid anything, and looking back, if they had picked a story for a reasonable chance to actually find a treasure, the Far West would not be the one I would have picked. They thanked me at the end for my time and freely sharing my information, and their interest in the story was the Captain Marsh aspect of it, because he was like real instrumental in the campaign with his boat. But when Custer got wiped out, Custer dominated the newspapers. So Captain Marsh was swept under the rug for history. And so that's what they were doing, was the motivation for the Far West story was the Captain Marsh story. So if I'd have had a choice and said, yeah, I think you want to do this one, I would have took the Point of Rocks, just north of Billings Logan International Airport. There's 2 lost treasure stories in that one. They're in my Custer Country book. There's a few others that are much more highly feasible to have a net end result. So otherwise, I can see why they wanted someone to come with locally. They're from California, the Travel Channel. They were doing 4 to 6 episodes, one behind the other. And so prior research on the area, that's where people like me that are locally come in and ended up helping them get the film footage to have the show. I have a different perspective on treasure hunting shows now that I've been in one, but I still enjoy watching them. I get to see places I probably will never get to go to. There's some beautiful scenery. People are going to see a section of Montana that is well worth taking the time to see. So anyway, until next time, have a good day.